Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the 18th Annual Tallgrass Film Festival. My name is Hannah Bothner, and I am the short film coordinator for the festival. Thank you all for watching and for tuning in. And we also would like to extend a special thank you to all of our sponsors. We could not be doing this without you. If you are enjoying your Tallgrass experience, please let everyone know on Facebook and Instagram. Tag us at Tallgrass Film and use the hashtag Tallgrass2020. I'd like to welcome to the Zoom today a couple of filmmakers from the History Short Film Program. And I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Brian, and then we can move on to Tessa and then to the Alina team. Just let us know your name, what film you are with, and what your role in the film was.
Hi, my name is Brian Morton. I am the producer, director, and narrator of The Ballad of Henry Ford. And I'm excited to share the short with everyone.
Awesome.
Tessa, hi, my name is Tessa Germain, and I'm the director and producer of Rosie, which is a fictionalized origin story to Rosie the Riveter from the We Can Do It poster. And I'm very excited to be at Tallgrass for my first year.
Awesome. The Alina team.
I am Nora Mariana. I'm the writer-producer of Alina.
I'm Rami Kodeh. I'm the director and editor on Alina. And obviously, we're very excited to share this with you guys.
Awesome. Well, we are so excited to have you all here today. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my first question. We can go sort of in that same round robin format there and start with Brian. So I want to talk about especially your source material and your inspiration for making this film, especially when we're talking about historical shorts. You know, we've got like real life events that we're talking about here, and you know, kind of what inspired you to talk about this film or talk about this instance, and why now? Brian, I want to start with you.
Yeah. So my documentary covers the events of Henry Ford in 1927. He was on trial for libel for his anti-Semitic newspaper, and to avoid trial, he faked his own assassination. And I just thought, you know, it's really interesting in terms of, you know, capitalists using the media to spread disinformation, and then also having someone, you know, essentially the most powerful person in America at the time, Henry Ford, the richest person in the world, who planned his own conspiracy and did it so poorly that it fell apart like within days. So it just felt kind of relevant and also timeless in a way, because it's just sort of interesting and funny.
Yeah, and it's interesting how quickly it fell apart in the 20s too, because you know, you don't expect the information to move as quickly as it does now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, in a lot of ways, Henry Ford was a genius, you know, a brilliant industrialist, but he was also like an idiot. So he planned this assassination, and he did it. He had all the means in the world to pull it off, and he still blew it.
Absolutely. Okay, Tessa?
Yeah, so I have always been very interested in the real Rosies, which are the women who worked during World War II, whether that be in like building ships, building planes, or just working as butchers. Because not a lot of people realize that so many women had to take up the jobs of men so that men could go to war during World War II. And a lot of people also don't realize, excuse me, that that's kind of like the start of the next wave of feminism, because these women, they never asked like, can I do this? They just knew they had to. And afterwards, they realized that they were worth so much more than society ever told them they were. And thanks to them, like, we get to pursue the careers that we want to today, because they realized they can do it, and they passed that on to their daughters and their daughters and their daughters. So, and plus they opened the doors for all of us. And I know the We Can Do It poster, that famous arm flex, everyone knows it, but in high school, I became really interested in like, what's the story behind this poster? And there's theories that it's this one woman, Naomi Parker Fraley, based on a photo of her in a magazine. But unfortunately, there's no way to find out that's actually true. The artist passed away and he has no descendants and no literature. So it's kind of this untold story. So I really wanted to just give that poster and that Rosie a story that matches the strength of all these women from the war. And I wanted it to show also kind of the things that they've been through and what women are still going through today when it comes to entering a man's field.
Absolutely. On to the Alina team.
Sure. Yeah. For us, it was the initial spark was looking at women, specifically in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. My mom is a 5'3" Jewish woman who saved our family in many ways from an anti-Semitic dictatorship. So we were both very struck by the fact that there are thousands of women in history who are also, moms, grandmas, nurses, teachers, who, and specifically in the case of the Warsaw Ghetto, they saved more children than Oskar Schindler. They saved thousands of children, and we were really amazed at the ability of like one person, even with very little political clout, and in fact, being under Nazi occupation, how much they were able to do. And we just find that relevant today because there's unfortunately, a lot of hate in the world. And it was really inspiring to us that like how much an act of love can counter that, can be like a form of resistance. So that's where this really came from.
Absolutely. So wonderful. So you guys, because you were all based around, all you had films based around these historical times, whether it was more like of a historical fiction, but based off of real stories like Rosie, whether it's, going out and finding those clips and those newspaper clippings and like actual footage for Ballad of Henry Ford, or, based off of real stories, but also maybe a little bit more on the historical fiction side of things with Alina. Can you talk about your research process into, how you created and wrote the story that you told, and maybe a bit about, what you found out there that helped influence where your story went, and I very interested in for the Alina team, like how much some of those like really interesting elements, how much they were real, like the codes that they're talking in the film, that kind of thing. We can start with you guys since I directed that directly to you.
Sure. We did a lot of research, actually. Yeah. It was over the course of a couple of years, off and on. A lot of it was reading. We spoke with a Holocaust survivor himself, who was around the age of the characters during the war, and he's like 90, he's almost 100 now. Wow. He's a bit younger than the characters, but still like an early teen. Yeah. A lot of it is based on composite events. So for example, the codes, that's how the women spoke. They spoke in code over the phones. They used cigarette papers. So all of that's just what these young women came up with when they didn't really have, a lot of weaponry or a lot of, manpower, but they had their wits. Yeah. Yeah. So that's all true. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything.
No, it was really the museum and
the Holocaust Museum was wonderful also, with us. Yeah,
and some books and and to add to this as well is I grew up in a country that's like very insecure when it comes to security. Like I'm a child of war basically, and not to compare anything, but I was raised with war basically. So it was immediate for me to connect with the research that you were doing, mm-hmm. and to add the craft that was added to the film, like getting inspired with what I was doing, with the way how I grew up, basically, from the lighting to the sound to
in the mood of the actors.
Yeah, like the rawness of how one can behave amidst crisis or war or yeah.
Amazing. That's so cool. We can move on to Tessa.
Yeah, so for Rosie, it was lots of research for many years, as same with Alina. But I think the most valuable thing for me was I actually went up to Richmond, California, to the Rosie the Riveter Museum at their national park, and they were having a Rosie rally, which they do every year. Well, not this year, but typically every year they bring in Rosies from all over the state and some from around the country, and people who are just passionate about Rosie the Riveter. And I actually had the opportunity to meet like multiple women who worked during the war and talk to them about their personal experiences, which was so special. I actually met a woman who was named Rose, and she was a riveter at an aviation
That's so
factory.
Cool.
That totally blew my mind. And that was way after like writing the first few drafts of the script too. But it was really special talking to them about their experience, and some of them were able to continue working after the war. A lot of them were kicked out of their jobs afterwards, which we don't really touch on in the film, but I wish we could have, because it's such an important part of history. But something else that was really vital for me was like watching documentaries and interviews with real Rosies, some of which are still with us, some who are not. And I remember there's this project with NYU called the Real Rosie the Riveter Project. And they have interviews, like hour-long interviews with all of these women who worked during the war, which is so beneficial. And in one of them, the woman was talking about how they weren't getting equal pay, they weren't being treated properly, and she was so annoyed by it. So she went and spoke to the unions. And they were like, they flat out said to her, "We don't want you women here." Oh, and she just was ruthless, and she kept going back and going back and going back until finally they're like, "Fine, you can be unionized." And she said, no, my whole factory is going to be unionized. And she got all the women into the union. And it was amazing. And that was so huge for me because we have Rose talking to a union representative and having him shut her down in the exact same way. And we have them like putting together, spoilers, I guess, if you haven't seen it.
They should be playing after they've watched the films.
Okay, good.
Just to let you all know.
We have them all walking out together, and that's based on real experiences of real women who did come together and say, we're not working together in this environment until you do this, this, and this, which is to do that in the 40s is just wild. So yeah, our story, I mean, what's nice is it's a narrative. So I was able to kind of mold it to what I wanted it to be, but everything in the film is based on a real event that happened in history.
It's incredible. Hey, Brian, on to you about research.
Yeah, so I first heard of the story probably like 4 years before I started actual like production, and the research and writing definitely took like the most time. Fortunately, you know, Henry Ford's life is really well documented. There are a couple specifically books that essentially break it down like day by day of what he was doing. And then the period of time that I was covering, the first 20 years of the 1910s, 1920s, the Ford Motor Company was actually the biggest film production company in the world, probably, or at least in the US. So, I was able to make an assembly cut with, archival footage, which was also like free to access, which was like great for me, through like the National Archives and the Henry Ford Museum. So, being able to like build a short that's a lot of archival footage is really nice and like accessible. So that, the research, it was relatively easy.
Absolutely. That's always so nice when it's all there and free to access, especially. I'd like to talk about casting for all of you. This is a little different for you, Brian, because you are the narrator, the main person in there. You can talk about that if you would like, but you know, we've got Alia Shaka in Alina, and just so many incredible, like really powerful women in Rosie and in Alina. Can you talk about how you found your cast and you know, and what you were looking for, that kind of process? So we can start with Alina.
Ooh. It was definitely a journey, like as any production or pre-production is, right?
Yeah.
A lot of ups and downs. At some point you think the film is not gonna be made, and then you plunge again and it gets made. And anyway, for Alia, we had her in mind for a while, and for the woman who played the baby's mother, she was just attached to the project since
It's a friend.
Yeah, she's a friend, and she was attached to the project since the kind of the early
The research phase, I would say.
Yeah,
even.
like the early phases. Yeah.
It's random, the rest, don't you think?
It was so random. Some of them were like we were able to get the cast like a couple of weeks or a month before the first day of filming, and others we were able to find them like a day or two before.
Wow.
It was challenging, but it was so fun at the same time, which is always that's the fun magic about filmmaking, because some problem solving, you start waiting for a problem to happen, and if it doesn't happen, you actually get stressed out even more because it's inevitable, it's coming.
Yeah.
So that was it. The baby also was.
Baby was the hardest person to cast.
Oh yeah,
honestly,
hard to cast, yeah.
Because the baby's 3 months old, and it's interesting because when I haven't worked with babies before. I don't think you had either, but you have to kind of cast parents, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to be around, and you have to. It's not just a baby; it's like a package. And we were so lucky. We found really right before a lovely couple.
Yeah.
Who had just adopted. I mean, they just adopted her like right before her. So she has her own interesting story. So it was kind of like she has like a sad card now from the shoot. It's really cute, but she was actually very hard to find, but ended up being so lovely and had great chemistry. We had the chemistry read with Rebecca, who played the mom, just to see how they reacted, and they actually like took to each other so quickly.
Well, that's so awesome.
Yeah, very cute. Very cute.
Okay, Tessa, talk about Rosie.
Yeah, so we did the classic casting in LA. We went through Kara Sullivan casting, who was amazing. And thanks to her, we found so many talented people. But we also, some of it was a little bit roundabout. For example, James, our love interest, who's actually named James, ironically. He was a friend of a friend, and they were like, hey, I have someone. They read the script and they're like, I have someone who's perfect for this part. I'm like, all right, have him read for it, send me a tape. And he just embodied James so perfectly. He's adorable, he's awkward, he's everything that you want, and he's the sweetest man. And he's an avid swing dancer. So for our big swing scene, I mean, he didn't get to do a lot of dancing, but he taught everyone else how to dance.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was better casting than I could have ever imagined. Honestly, all my actors were fantastic. Obviously, I was most stressed about casting Rose, because not only do they have to match the poster, but they have to be able to carry the entire film on their shoulders, and they have to be likable, but they have to be strong. You don't want them to come off too strong, and it's such an annoying balance that I feel like every woman deals with in day to day, but also portraying it on screen is so hard. And like up to the night before callbacks, I'm looking at all these new submissions because I was like, we're not finding anyone, not loving anyone. And then Bethany submitted, and she was the last submission to come in. And I was like, we have to see her. And Cara was so mad. She's like, we have enough people coming to callbacks. I'm like, no, I need her to come in. And I'm so glad that I pushed for that because she was amazing. Just right instantly when I met her, I knew that she was Rose. She carries herself so well. She really puts herself into every project that she does, and she does so much research into it as well. And it was such a treat working with her. And my favorite part, honestly, was rehearsing with everyone, because I got to rehearse with her and Stacy, who plays Gladys, right before filming. And when we were working on that scene where they're talking at the fuselage that they're building, they had such amazing chemistry. They became friends like instantaneously, and it reads on screen too. You can just see how bonded that they seem already. And I remember rehearsing with them, and we did it once, got it through, we did it again, and it was perfect. I was like, okay, do you guys want to do it like 1 or 2 more times? And they're like, no, we got this. We're ready. They show up to set, and I'm like, okay, do you guys want to rehearse this? They're like, nah, we got this. We know it. It was honestly like 2 takes for both of them. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
I love finding people who just have that chemistry.
Absolutely. So a little bit more specific on the films here now. So Brian, the musical aspect of it all, like the ballad part, what led you to telling the story in that way?
Yeah, I did an earlier version that was a more traditional narration, and it was the story's interesting, but it just didn't feel very like cinematic. So I'm like, what's an extra thing we can add that sort of just makes it more of like a film? And I'm a big fan of like Woody Guthrie and folk singers, Phil Oakes and stuff, who have like a social aspect to their music. And Woody Guthrie had an album called The Ballads of Sacco and Vanzetti about the, like anarchist Italian immigrants who were framed for a crime they didn't commit and were executed for it, which actually happens around the same time of the events of my film. So yeah. I thought, just being a fan of that type of music, I thought it was a natural way to tell the story, and also kind of allowed me to tell the story from a perspective of maybe somebody from that time period who didn't really have the hindsight of, knowing what happened in World War II and like knowing that these events really directly funneled into like the Holocaust and, understanding the lasting impact that Henry Ford would have, which made it just kind of more like less heavy, I guess. Because I also did sort of want, it's a serious subject, but I wanted to have like, I didn't want it to be like dour. I wanted to, it's like a musical. There's some funny aspects and stuff to it too. So, for those reasons, I felt like it was sort of a natural way to tell the story.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, I actually didn't know about like the Henry Ford and like all his anti-Semitism until I went to the Dallas Holocaust Museum, and there was like an entire corner dedicated to that. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's very interesting. I'm just now putting together that these films are all very connected in their time periods too. They all have very different feels, but they're very connected. So this is I like this little panel here. It's very interesting. So for the Alina team, I have to imagine that it was like kind of difficult to pay attention to like the historical accuracy when we're talking about so many different pieces of it, from the setting to like the way people talked and the way the way people dressed, like that kind of thing. Can you talk about finding all of those things and trying to rein all of those things in, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, there are different aspects when it comes to that. Like, if I want to talk a little bit about the costume and the production design to be as authentic as possible to that period, and to also how to be authentic about how people were living in the Warsaw Ghetto, what kind of interiors, what kind of spaces and environment and atmospheres they were living in. And again, mixing that with what I've experienced as a child of war, being born in the middle of a very outrageous civil war in the early 80s. The production designer and his team really looked, well, we showed them a lot of like references and pictures from that era, and they did their own research, and they were we were lucky in that regard. They were extremely detailed, even things that we were not seeing on screen and the camera was not necessarily showing. They were trying to be as accurate as possible to that period of time. The costume designer, she was the best costume designer we've worked with. Yeah, she was amazing. She was really, really accurate. She was so meticulous, and she was super like insisting on every single like
things you don't see on camera.
Yeah, to get them really right.
She cared about the stocking stitches and really down to, which is perfect for us because we're also, I think it helped with the actors just in terms of getting them in that mindset. A lot of them said that when they went on to set, they were all kind of, it helped them. It helped them really kind of get into a certain mood.
Yeah.
With the language, it was really interesting because the woman who, for anyone who's seen it, the woman who's smoking the cigarette, she's Polish. And so it's interesting because she was very familiar with, even though a lot of the language we used wasn't Polish, she was familiar with the speaking patterns of the time period.
Oh, yeah.
And brought in her own research. So that really helped us kind of feel more comfortable in terms of like how people sounded, because a lot of times we think of people from a historical setting as like, almost like aliens, meaning like they didn't behave like us, they didn't like, wax figures in a museum, and that's not the case. I'm sure all of us on this panel had to think about that, like how human can you make these people feel? So she was I think very helpful in that regard, just in terms of trying to help it with its accuracy.
Yeah.
Awesome. So along the same lines for Tessa with Rosie, capturing the vibe and some of that historical accuracy down to costumes, to the way people talked, to the way people walked, kind of everything like that. Too, I have to imagine similarly, the setting must have been really hard to capture with a large part of a plane in this environment. Can you talk a little bit about all of that?
Yeah, that was definitely the biggest challenge, was production design. because we recreated a World War II aviation factory to the best of our abilities. And my production design team, the art team, did such a phenomenal job with it. So I knew I always wanted them working on a plane and actually riveting on a plane, because it's Rosie the Riveter. You have to show that. And so we built a B-17 fuselage, basically, which is a World War II bomber. And they built it as accurately as they could. We even got the same rivets that they used during the war, which we still manufacture and stuff, which is insane. They're also really tiny, holding a plane together, which we learned a lot about plane manufacturing making this film.
Yeah.
Something I didn't expect.
I have to imagine.
But No, it was a challenge. We filmed at Brackett Field in Pomona, and the nicest airport ever, the nicest people ever. We actually filmed in a helicopter pad, and in a where they hold helicopters, and they let us take it over for basically a week and turn it into the 1940s, which was a challenge because they had recently modernized everything. So we had to like switch out door handles, and we had to hide all the windows and get rid of the exit signs and do all that, which was difficult to say the least. But similar to Alina, it was all about the little details that you put in there. Like when we were doing our research, we actually found a news article from around the same time in 1943 about how to treat and train women in the workplace, and giving guidelines about giving them their breaks, telling them exactly what they need to do, otherwise they get confused, and all of those annoying little things. And my production designer, actually, they redid it and printed it, and they put it on like one of the boards behind Rose in some of the scenes. And if you're looking really closely, you'll notice that, and you'll see news articles from like the exact same time that we had said it. It was all those little details that really just made it come to life and made it feel realistic. And I was so lucky that I had Kendra as our costume designer. She actually was graduating from FITM at the time, and so she used this as her thesis film as well as ours, which was amazing because she had to dress like 50 people, maybe more.
Yeah, like for that dance scene especially.
Oh yeah. It was insane. She was 9 months pregnant when she did this.
Wow.
Yeah. She is a powerhouse. So what she did, she went on eBay and she ended up ordering like a bunch of authentic World War II costumes. You guys are nodding your heads. You know, you go searching for all the little relics, all the pieces from history. We were going to antique shops and buying stuff. Like those little details are so important to making it feel real. And I mean, in terms of the aviation factory, like building a fuselage, that was like a huge undertaking, and we wanted that to feel realistic, and we wanted that to be a big centerpiece of the film. But it was the little details like the rivets that made it feel as real as it did.
Absolutely.
Did that answer your question?
Yes,
I feel like
absolutely.
I just rambled.
And then finally to Brian, I have to imagine that you also might have had some challenges with your setting with the fire, but it made for a really cool effect. Can you talk about filming behind or near a campfire?
Yeah, totally. So that's my mom's backyard.
Okay.
Originally I was gonna go out to like Malibu Creek, and I'm thinking like we need a generator, we need all this stuff. But we just faked it in my mom's backyard. So we had like, running water and stuff. And I wanted to, really, what do you call it? Like, get the blacks really low, because I want it to almost feel like you're shooting in it. Like this is take place in some sort of like a geographic, or like a small like theater type situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I go, it's all kind of, it's almost framed by black. And I just got a fire going, and I was leaning over it with my guitar, and I think it was bad for my guitar because it doesn't stay in tune anymore. And I drank a lot of whiskey to like keep so I didn't get like mucus built up. You know what I mean? Because you're over the campfire and you sing good. But I recorded the music somewhere else.
Okay.
But for the narration, yeah. So I made a fire, I drank a lot of whiskey, and then we did a lot of takes to get the words right.
Absolutely.
It was fun. It was like a regular Friday night,
There you go. That's so cool. I love the idea of the historicalness of it. I like the idea. I'd love to know that you were drinking whiskey, because I really like the idea of just walking along a path and stumbling upon this man with his guitar who's a little bit tipsy and telling you the story of Henry Ford.
Yeah, no, that's literally been every Friday night for me for the past few
There you
years.
go.
Pretty
Oh
much.
yeah,
Just
absolutely.
telling people about Henry Ford.
I like that a lot. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. I want to wrap it up with one final question. I'd like to know first, what's next for your film, and next, what is next for you, or do you have anything to like send people to, anything to plug, anything like that? We can start with Brian.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more to this story. I'd like to do more, whether it's, going to be like a feature doc or maybe a stage production or something, some narrative version of it. I'm definitely going to keep doing that. But, for updates for now, you can find all my socials are at BE Morton, Bravo Echo, MORTON on Twitter and Instagram and like everything else. So yeah, follow me and I'll be updating.
Awesome. And then Tessa?
Yeah, in terms of Rosie, I mean, I'm hoping one day that it's going to be a feature film, since these women deserve to be honored in a feature-length movie. But for now, we're just running the festival circuit, playing at Tallgrass. And then next up is Copa Shorts in November. And yeah, you can follow, for me, I'm working on a documentary with the producer. I'm assisting her with it, so that's exciting. But you can kind of follow that at Tessa Germain on Instagram or at Rosie the Film on Instagram.
Awesome. And to Nora and Rami?
Yeah, we're also hoping to continue the story,
Yeah,
whatever
definitely.
form that it takes.
That would be really incredible.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
we hope that can happen at some point. And yeah, similarly, we're just doing the festival circuit. Thrilled to be part of this. Thrilled to watch the other films at Tallgrass. The lineup looks amazing. And you can follow us through rami.code in terms of Insta, or mine.
It's
too.
more you. It's more you.
He's like very chill on social media. Some food photos, and that's what he does. Yeah, mine's Nora Mariana Salem. So that's my handle on Twitter, or on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm so thrilled to hear each of you that you're thinking about moving on with this, because I think these are all stories that I'd love to watch in like a full feature and see where else things will go. I know you talked a little bit earlier, Tessa, about like, after the war, like I feel like that's not really a story that we've seen too much of with these women, and there's so much fascinating and weird stuff in Henry Ford's life that I'm sure that we can explore more of. So I'm really excited to see what happens next with all of these films. And I want to thank you all out there for tuning in and watching this. Go follow those people on Twitter and Instagram and see what they're up to next. Thank you all so much, and keep watching films out there.